My name is Rachel Morgan, and I was 24 when I first uncovered the kind of betrayal that slices deeper than anything else: family betrayal. People always told me growing up that sisters were supposed to be your best friends, built-in protectors, partners in crime. I wanted to believe that so badly. I tried to believe it with my whole heart. But in my case, my sister, Hannah, was more like a mirror I never asked for, always reminding me of what I lacked, what I failed at, what I would never measure up to. I can still remember the day my acceptance letter should have arrived. The crisp spring air, the nervous flutter in my stomach every time the mailbox creaked open. I had worked endlessly for this: late nights in the library, extra shifts at the coffee shop to cover application fees, hours spent poring over essay drafts. I wanted college not just as a step toward a career, but as a symbol that I wasn't the lesser daughter my parents sometimes implied I was. Hannah, 3 years older than me, had always been the golden child. Straight A's in high school, prom queen, admitted into a prestigious university, her achievements sat like trophies on a shelf that I could never reach. But here's the thing: I wasn't jealous. At least, not in the beginning. I admired her. I thought if I worked just as hard, one day my parents would look at me with the same pride they looked at her. When I told Hannah I had applied to 4 universities, she had smiled, a soft but strange smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "That's great, Rachel," she'd said, tucking a strand of her glossy brunette hair behind her ear. "But don't get your hopes up. Those places are really competitive." At the time, I brushed it off. Hannah had always been pragmatic, sometimes bordering on harsh, but I believed she was still in my corner. When weeks passed and I didn't hear back from the one school I had pinned my dreams on, Westbridge University, I felt my hope dimming. Westbridge wasn't just any school. It was known for its creative writing program, one I had built my ambitions around. I checked the mail every day until my hands grew numb with disappointment. No letter. Nothing but bills and catalogs and the occasional bank statement. Finally, I convinced myself I had simply been rejected. I told myself it wasn't the end of the world, that maybe I wasn't good enough yet, that maybe this was life's way of pushing me towards something smaller, safer. But inside, I felt hollow, like my hard work had evaporated into nothingness. What I didn't know then was that my letter had arrived, and Hannah had intercepted it. It would be 2 years before I learned the truth. 2 years of piecing together a life I hadn't chosen, working retail jobs, watching my friends move on to bigger things while I stayed behind. I remember folding jeans in the back of a store one evening, sweat sticking to my back, when I thought, is this really all I'm meant for? I had no idea that across town, Hannah was carrying a secret that would eventually blow our relationship apart. The revelation came not in some dramatic confrontation, but in a quiet, almost mundane way. It was a summer evening, sticky with heat, and my parents had asked me to grab a box of old documents from the attic. Hannah had already moved back home after college. She hadn't graduated yet, taking longer because she switched majors, but she still carried herself like royalty in our house. While she lounged downstairs, I climbed the attic steps. Dust floated in the air like glittering ghosts as I opened the box. Old report cards, photographs, tax forms. And then, slipped between folders, I found it. A white envelope, yellowing slightly at the edges, with the Westbridge University crest stamped on the corner. My breath caught. My name was there. My address. Hands trembling, I tore it open. "Dear Rachel Morgan, congratulations." I didn't read the rest. My vision blurred. My heart thundered so hard, I thought it might break through my ribs. I had been accepted. I had gotten in. And all this time Hannah had known. I staggered down the attic steps, letter clutched in my hand like evidence from a crime scene. When I entered the living room, Hannah looked up from her phone, eyes flicking to the paper. For a split second, her face drained of color. Then she plastered on a smile. "Oh," she said lightly, "you found that." "You hid it," I whispered. My voice cracked, my throat tight. "You took it from me." Hannah's smile faltered. She set her phone down slowly, folding her hands in her lap. "Rachel, you wouldn't have lasted there. Westbridge chews people up. You think you're ready, but you're not." I was protecting you. Protecting me. The words slammed into me like ice water. Protecting me? My voice rose, shaking with fury. You stole my future, Hannah. Do you have any idea what this cost me? What it did to me? Our parents, alarmed by the shouting, rushed in. They asked what was going on, but I couldn't even form the words. I just held up the letter, my body shaking. She hid it. She hid my acceptance. For the first time, I saw something in my mother's eyes I'd never seen before when looking at Hannah. Disappointment. She turned to my sister, her voice quiet but sharp. Is this true? Hannah stammered, tried to explain, but the truth was undeniable. She had robbed me of a chance that should have been mine. And, in that moment, something in me snapped. The little sister who had always stood in her shadow, always accepted the crumbs of approval, was gone. In her place stood someone who realized the depth of betrayal and the strength born from it. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. The anger swirled inside me, hot and suffocating. I thought about every late night studying, every time I told myself to hold on just a little longer, every tear I had shed thinking I wasn't good enough when all along I had been accepted. I had earned it. Hannah had stolen not just a letter, but 2 years of my life. But she had also lit a fire in me. I didn't know how, but I vowed to take back what was mine, to rebuild, to rise, and to prove to her, to my family, and to myself that I was stronger than the lies and sabotage she had wrapped me in. And that's where the real story begins. I didn't find out about the letter until weeks later, and even then, it wasn't because Sarah came clean. It was because my mother asked me if I had made a decision yet about which college I wanted to attend. We were sitting at the kitchen table, my mother sipping her coffee, while the morning light slanted through the window. She had her hair pulled back, her glasses perched on the edge of her nose. So, Emily, she said casually, have you told them you're going to accept? I looked up from my cereal, confused. Accept what? She frowned. Your acceptance letter, of course. The one from Ridgeway. The letter came weeks ago. Didn't you? Her voice trailed off as she saw the look on my face. My heart stopped. My spoon clattered into the bowl. What acceptance letter? I asked, my voice tight, almost strangled. The color drained from her face. She set her mug down carefully, as though afraid it would shatter. Emily, you didn't get it? My mind spun. All at once, I understood. My chest ached like someone had kicked me hard in the ribs. I shook my head slowly, my eyes burning. No, I whispered. I didn't get anything. For a moment, the kitchen was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. Then Mom pushed her chair back abruptly and hurried toward the counter, where we usually left the mail. She began rifling through the pile of envelopes and loose papers, her movements jerky, frantic. It should have been here. I saw it come in. It was a big envelope with the Ridgeway crest. I couldn't breathe. I could barely sit still. My mind replayed every glance, every smirk, every subtle shift of Sarah's expression in the past few weeks. The way she had hovered when I checked the mailbox. The way she had teased me about, maybe they forgot about you. It hit me like a sledgehammer. Sarah had taken it. When Mom finally turned around, her hands were empty. Her expression said it all. Bewilderment, shock, dawning realization. Emily, it's not here. I pushed back from the table, my chair scraping loudly against the tile. My whole body was shaking. She took it, I said flatly. Sarah. She took it. Mom opened her mouth to protest, but the words didn't come. She didn't need to say anything. We both knew. I stormed up the stairs, every step thudding like a drumbeat of betrayal. I didn't even think about knocking. I flung open Sarah's door. She was lying on her bed scrolling through her phone, her blonde hair falling in waves over her shoulder, looking so perfectly unbothered that I wanted to scream. When she looked up, her eyes flickered, just for a second, then settled back into that cool, dismissive stare she always gave me. What's your problem? She asked, her voice flat. You hid it. I snapped, my throat tight with rage. The Ridgeway letter. You took it. Where is it? For a moment, she didn't move. She just stared at me, her lips curling into the faintest smirk. Then she sat up slowly, swinging her legs off the side of the bed. "Oh," she said lightly. "You found out." The room tilted. My fists clenched at my sides.
Why?
"Why would you do that to me?" Sarah rolled her eyes as if I were overreacting. "Because you don't belong there, Emily. Ridgeway is my dream, not yours. You don't even know what you want. You just applied because you were scared of being left behind. And honestly, I was doing you a favor. You wouldn't have lasted there." Her words sliced through me like glass. "That wasn't your decision to make." I shouted, my voice cracking. She shrugged, her expression maddeningly calm. "Well, someone had to make it." I lunged forward, my hands trembling. "Where is it?" For the first time, her smirk faltered. She reached into the drawer of her desk, pulled something out, and tossed it onto the bed. A thick envelope. My breath caught as I saw the Ridgeway crest glinting in gold on the corner. My acceptance letter. I snatched it up, my fingers clutching the paper so tightly I thought it might tear. My heart raced as I ripped it open, my eyes devouring the words. "Congratulations, Emily Carter. We are delighted to offer you admission." The room blurred with tears. I had gotten in. I had actually gotten in. But the joy was poisoned, tainted by the fact that I should have known weeks ago, celebrated weeks ago. Sarah had stolen that from me. She had stolen my moment, my pride, my validation. When I looked back at her, she was watching me with narrowed eyes, her arms crossed. "Go ahead," she said coolly. "But don't come crying to me when you fail. That place will eat you alive."
I didn't respond.
I couldn't. My throat was too tight, my hands shaking too violently. I walked out, clutching the letter to my chest like a lifeline. Mom was waiting at the bottom of the stairs, her face pale. She saw the envelope in my hands, and her eyes widened. "Emily." "She took it," I whispered, my voice hoarse. "She actually took it from me." Mom pressed a hand to her mouth. For a long moment, she didn't say anything. Then she pulled me into her arms, holding me tightly. "I'm so sorry, baby. I'm so sorry." I buried my face against her shoulder, the sobs shaking out of me uncontrollably. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, the acceptance letter on my nightstand. I should have felt victorious, validated. But instead, I felt hollow. Sarah's betrayal ran deeper than I had realized. It wasn't just about jealousy. It wasn't just about Ridgeway. It was about control. About her need to always be one step ahead of me, to keep me in her shadow. And I realized something else too. She would never stop. If I let her get away with this, she would find another way to sabotage me, another way to make sure I never stood on my own. I clutched the letter tighter. If she wanted me to fail, she was going to be disappointed. Because I wasn't just going to Ridgeway. I was going to prove her wrong every single step of the way. The next few weeks were a blur of paperwork, financial aid meetings, and late-night planning. I tried to ignore Sarah, to build walls so thick that her presence couldn't seep through. But she made it impossible. Every time I walked past her in a hallway, she muttered something under her breath. Every time I brought up Ridgeway with my parents, she rolled her eyes. When I shopped for dorm supplies, she made snide remarks about how long I would last before coming home crying. Each jab chipped away at me, but I refused to let it show. I refused to give her the satisfaction. On the outside, I played the part of the determined college-bound student. On the inside, though, I was unraveling. My confidence, already fragile, trembled with every insult she threw my way. At night, lying in bed, I could still hear her voice echoing in my head. "You don't belong there.
You won't last.
You'll fail." Sometimes I almost believed her. But then I'd look at that letter. I'd trace the Ridgeway crest with my finger, and I'd remember. They had chosen me, not her.
Me.
And that had to mean something. It wasn't until the night before I left for Ridgeway that Sarah finally showed her true colors again. We were in the kitchen, just the two of us. I was making a list of things to pack, and she leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "You really think this is going to change anything?" she asked, her voice dripping with disdain. I didn't look up.
"Yes.
"I do." She let out a sharp laugh. "You'll see." Ridgeway is going to eat you alive. And when it does, I'll be there to say I told you so. I looked at her then, really looked at her. The sharp lines of her face, the hardness in her eyes, the desperate need to see me crumble. For the first time, I didn't feel fear. I didn't feel doubt. I felt resolve. Maybe it will be hard, I said quietly. But you'll never take this from me again. Never. Her smirk wavered, just for a second, and that was enough. When I turned back to my list, my hands were steady. My heart, for the first time in weeks, was strong. Because no matter what waited for me at Ridgeway, one thing was certain. I wasn't living in her shadow anymore. The day I left for Ridgeway is burned into my memory like a scar. I remember the weight of my duffel bag pulling at my shoulder, the smell of late summer air, and the hollow silence that hung between Sarah and me as I loaded the car. Mom fussed over every detail, making sure I had extra towels and notebooks, while Dad carried boxes like they weighed nothing. Sarah stood on the porch with her arms folded, watching me as though I were walking to the gallows instead of the threshold of my future. "Good luck," she said finally, her voice flat, sarcastic. "You're going to need it." I didn't answer. I just got in the car and slammed the door shut, blocking her out with a sound. But even as Ridgeway's campus came into view, a sprawling maze of red brick buildings with ivy crawling up their sides, students laughing and calling out to each other, banners snapping in the breeze, I felt her words following me like a shadow. "You're going to need it." The campus was alive with energy. New students lugged suitcases up dorm steps, parents hugged their children tightly, faculty members handed out maps and schedules with bright, welcoming smiles. And me? I was a knot of nerves trying to convince myself I belonged. My dorm room was small but bright, with 2 narrow beds, a pair of desks, and a window overlooking the quad. My roommate hadn't arrived yet, so for a moment it was just me, standing in the middle of that bare space with my letter in my hand, whispering to myself, "I made it. I'm here." But the moment of triumph was fleeting. As soon as Mom and Dad left, Mom crying and Dad giving me a stiff, proud pat on the shoulder, I felt the weight of silence settle over me. Alone. That was the word that echoed through me. And in the silence, Sarah's voice came back. "You don't belong here. You're not cut out for this." The first week was brutal. Orientation events, crowded lecture halls, professors who seemed to expect us to already know everything. I spent hours poring over syllabi that looked more like foreign languages than coursework. Everyone around me seemed so confident, so sure of themselves, like they were born to be here. I smiled when people introduced themselves, nodded when professors spoke, but inside, I was unraveling. At night, lying in my new bed, I stared at the ceiling and wondered if Sarah had been right. One night, about a week in, I called home. Mom answered, her voice warm, but Sarah's laughter echoed faintly in the background. "How's my Ridgeway girl?" Mom asked. I hesitated. "It's a lot. Harder than I thought." "You'll adjust," she said quickly, but then there was a pause, and I heard Sarah say something muffled. Mom tried to cover the phone, but I caught the tail end of it. Sarah's mocking tone. "See? She's already cracking." My throat tightened. "I'll talk to you later," I mumbled, hanging up before Mom could respond. That night, I cried into my pillow, furious at myself for letting her voice worm its way back into my head. But here's the thing. The more Sarah tried to haunt me, the more stubborn I became. I refused to give her the satisfaction of being right. I started sitting in the front row of my lectures, forcing myself to ask questions even when my voice shook. I spent hours in the library, my eyes burning from late-night study sessions, my notes filling up with messy handwriting. I joined a study group, even though my chest tightened with nerves every time I walked into the room. And slowly, piece by piece, Ridgeway began to feel less like enemy territory and more like a place I could belong. One afternoon, I walked across the quad carrying a stack of books when a girl with curly brown hair and an easy smile stopped me. "Hey, you're in my lit theory class, right?" "I'm Anna." Her voice was warm, inviting, and for the first time since arriving, I felt seen. We fell into step together, talking about the ridiculous reading assignments and the professor's obsession with obscure authors. By the time we reached the library, it felt like I had made my first real friend. Anna became my anchor. She dragged me to campus events, introduced me to her circle of friends, and pulled me out of my shell bit by bit. With her, I could laugh. With her, I could breathe. But no matter how many new connections I made, Sarah lingered in the back of my mind. Every small success I had, acing a paper, answering a tough question in class, was followed by a whisper. Wait until you fail. It's coming. One night, about a month into the semester, Anna and I were walking back from a late study session. The campus was quiet, the lamplight casting long shadows across the path. Out of nowhere, I told her about Sarah. How she hid your acceptance letter? Anna asked, her voice sharp with disbelief. I nodded, my throat tightening. She didn't just hide it. She wanted me to think I wasn't good enough, that I didn't belong here. Anna stopped walking, turning to look at me. Her eyes burned with something fierce. Emily, that's not just cruel. That's sabotage. That's jealousy eating her alive. And you know what? The fact that you're here, right now, pushing through all of this, that's proof she's wrong. Her words hit me like a lifeline. Proof she's wrong. For weeks, I had been carrying Sarah's betrayal like a weight, but in that moment, I realized something. Every step I took at Ridgeway was not just for me. It was a defiance, a rebuttal. I wasn't just proving myself to professors or classmates. I was proving myself against the voice that wanted me small. Of course, that didn't mean it was easy. Midterms nearly broke me. I spent 3 nights in a row awake, cramming facts and theories into my brain until everything blurred together. I stumbled into the exam hall with dark circles under my eyes and shaking hands. When the grades came back, I sat staring at my score, an A-, my heart hammering in disbelief. I wanted to call Mom. I wanted to shout, "Look, I did it." But I didn't, because I knew Sarah would hear. And she would twist it, minimize it, tear it down. Instead, I tucked the paper into my binder and whispered to myself, "You did this. Not her. You." By Thanksgiving break, the house felt different. I walked through the door with my backpack slung over my shoulder, my confidence fragile but growing. Mom hugged me like she hadn't seen me in years. Dad clapped me on the back, and Sarah just stood in the corner, her arms folded, watching me with narrowed eyes. "You survived," she said finally, her tone mocking. I met her gaze head-on for the first time in months. "More than survived," I said softly. Her jaw tightened. That night, lying in my old bed, I realized something that made my chest ache and my heart harden. Sarah wasn't going to change. She wasn't going to suddenly love me or support me. Her identity depended on me being small, being lesser. And if she couldn't take away Ridgeway, she would find another way to try. I had to decide, would I keep letting her dictate my story, or would I finally take it back? Winter break was supposed to be a reprieve. The kind of pause where you come home from campus, eat too much of your mother's cooking, and catch up on sleep without the constant hum of deadlines. But walking back into that house, I knew I wasn't walking into peace. The decorations were the same as always, garland wrapped sloppily along the banister, the old ceramic Santa sitting on the mantel, Mom's sugar cookies cooling on the counter, but the atmosphere was different. It was tight, tense, charged in a way I couldn't quite name until Sarah stepped into the kitchen. She looked me up and down like she was scanning for cracks. "Ridgeway hasn't chewed you up yet?" she asked with a sharp smile. "Nope," I said, forcing my tone light. Still standing. She arched an eyebrow, her voice dripping with mock sympathy. "Don't get too comfortable. First year's when most people drop out." Mom scolded her lightly. "Sarah, be nice." But the words fell flat. Mom had learned to let our battles run their course, like weather patterns she couldn't control. That night at dinner, Sarah dominated the conversation. She talked about her plans, her grades, her internship interviews lined up for spring. Every word was designed to make me feel smaller, as though my victories were scraps compared to her feasts. "So, what are you even majoring in?" she asked suddenly, turning her sharp gaze on me. "English," I said, steadying my voice. Sarah snorted. So basically, for years of reading books you could have borrowed from the library for free? Sounds useful. Dad coughed, shifting uncomfortably, but no one challenged her. No one ever did. I clenched my fork, my knuckles white. For the first time, though, instead of shrinking, I felt heat rising in me. Better than spending my life tearing other people down, I shot back before I could stop myself. The table went quiet. Sarah's eyes narrowed, a storm brewing, but before she could unleash it, Mom changed the subject. Still, the words hung in the air like smoke. After dinner, I retreated to my room, my heart still pounding. I stared at my reflection in the mirror, my long dark hair messy from travel, my hazel eyes tired but bright, and whispered, "You're not small. Not anymore." But Sarah wasn't finished. A few days later, while I was upstairs reading, I overheard her in the living room with Mom. "I just don't think Emily's cut out for Ridgeway," she said, her voice smooth, practiced. "She's struggling. You can see it. Maybe it would be kinder if she came home before she embarrasses herself." My chest tightened, rage and hurt flooding me at once. I wanted to storm downstairs, to shout the truth in her face, but instead I sat frozen, gripping my book so tightly the cover bent. Mom's response was muffled, but I caught enough. "She deserves her chance, Sarah. Don't you remember how excited she was when she got in?" A bitter laugh. Excited doesn't pay tuition. Excited doesn't make her smart enough to stay there. Her words dug into me like claws, reopening wounds I thought I'd closed. But something else rose beneath the pain, a new, unfamiliar strength. Sarah wanted me home, small, defeated. But every exam I passed, every friend I made, every page I wrote at Ridgeway was proof she couldn't control me anymore. When break ended and I packed my bags again, Sarah lingered in the doorway. "Don't get too attached to that place," she said, her voice cold. "People like you don't last there." I zipped my suitcase slowly, then turned to her. For the first time, I let her see the steel in my eyes. "Watch me." The drive back to campus felt different this time. I wasn't just going back to classes. I was going back to fight for my life, my place, my future. And Ridgeway welcomed me back like an old friend. The quad was dusted with snow, the library windows glowing warmly against the winter sky. Anna hugged me so tightly when I arrived that some of the tension I'd been carrying melted away. But even there, Sarah's shadow followed me. When I sat down to write my first paper of the semester, her voice whispered, "You're wasting your time. You'll fail." I clenched my pen, staring at the blank page, until Anna knocked on my door and plopped down on my bed. "You look like you're trying to summon demons with that notebook," she teased. "Just struggling to start," I admitted. She tilted her head. "Struggling means you're trying. And trying means you care. Sarah doesn't get to define you, Emily. You do." I blinked at her, stunned. I hadn't told her what Sarah had said over break, but it was as if she'd read the lines written all over my face. With her words echoing in me, I began to write. And once I started, the words poured out, fierce and alive, like they'd been waiting inside me all along. Weeks passed, and the semester tightened its grip. Assignments piled up, deadlines loomed, and exhaustion became my constant companion. But every time I thought about giving in, I remembered Sarah's smirk, her mocking laugh, her certainty that I would fail. And I pushed harder. By midterms, something inside me had shifted. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving. My professors began to notice, my grades reflected it, and even my classmates looked to me for help during study sessions. One evening, after receiving a paperback with glowing comments scrawled in the margins, I sat on the steps outside the library, the crisp winter air biting at my cheeks. For the first time, I let myself imagine a future where I wasn't defined by Sarah's shadow. A future where I was more than the lesser sister. But as the semester rolled toward spring, a letter arrived from home. Not for me. Sarah's name was scrawled across the front in Mom's handwriting. She had sent it accidentally to my dorm instead of Sarah's apartment. I almost tossed it aside, but something stopped me. My hands trembled as I held it, my chest tightening with an old, familiar ache. I didn't open it, of course. I slipped it into a new envelope and mailed it to her address. But holding it in my hands brought me back to the night I discovered my own acceptance letter hidden in Sarah's drawer. The rage bubbled up again, hot and sharp. And with it came a realization. Sarah hadn't just tried to sabotage me once. She was always waiting, always watching, always ready to strike again. For the first time, I began to wonder. Maybe proving her wrong wasn't enough. Maybe, just maybe, it was time she faced the consequences of what she had done. The thought scared me, but it also lit something inside me. A fire I couldn't ignore. The night after the confrontation with my family felt endless, as though the universe was daring me to fall asleep, so it could unravel me in my most vulnerable state. I lay in the guest room of the small rental cottage I had taken just off the shoreline in Maui, staring at the ceiling fan as it whirred in slow, lazy rotations. My chest ached, not from physical pain but from the lingering weight of words spoken with venom. My mother's sneer, my sister's smirk, my father's silence. It was a symphony of betrayal that refused to fade, no matter how much the ocean outside tried to lull me into calm. I thought of packing up and flying back home. I could end the trip early, save myself the agony of running into them at every corner, and retreat into the safety of my apartment back on the mainland. But then I reminded myself, this was my trip, my money, my effort, my dream to finally break free of their chains, even if just for a week. I wasn't going to let them steal this from me too. The decision settled in my chest like a flame, small but stubborn. I was staying, and I was going to reclaim something they had no right to take, my peace. The next morning, I rose earlier than I had in years. At dawn, the beach was empty, painted in soft hues of lavender and peach as the sun began to stretch across the horizon. I pulled on a white sundress, the fabric light against my skin, and slipped barefoot onto the sand. The tide kissed my ankles, cool and foamy, while the salty breeze tangled through my hair. For the first time since arriving in Hawaii, I felt something shift inside me. A fragile sense of freedom. Nobody to mock me. Nobody to compare me to someone else. Just me, the ocean, and the sound of my own heartbeat finding a steady rhythm again. But peace doesn't last forever. Not when your enemies were the faces of those who raised you. By the afternoon, I found myself back at the resort for a pre-planned family outing. It wasn't optional. I knew if I didn't show up, the whispers and accusations would circle back to me. So I went head high, hard-armored. The lobby was buzzing with tourists, their laughter echoing against marble walls, and there in the center of it all was my family. My sister was dressed in a glittering sarong, laughing too loudly at something her husband had said, while my mother fussed with her jewelry, like a queen adjusting her crown. My father, as always, stood slightly behind them, as though blending into the wallpaper. When they saw me, the air shifted. My sister's laughter faltered into a smirk. My mother raised an eyebrow as though surprised I had the courage to show my face. "Emily," she said flatly, "we weren't sure if you'd join us." Her tone suggested she had already written me off as weak. I wanted to fire back, to remind her that I wasn't the fragile child she thought I was. But instead, I smiled. Not the brittle kind they were used to, but something sharper, laced with a promise. "I wouldn't miss it," I said, steady and calm. That moment, though small, felt like planting a flag in the middle of enemy territory. The day's activity was a boat excursion around the islands. The sea glittered like liquid sapphire as we boarded the vessel, the captain greeting us with a sun-worn grin. My family took the cushioned seats at the bow, snapping photos and chattering about how beautiful everything was. I sat apart, near the railing, the wind whipping strands of hair into my face. The water stretched endlessly before me, and I let it drown out their voices. For a while, it worked, until my sister decided she needed a new audience. She slid into the seat across from me, her smile dripping with false sweetness. "You know, Emily," she began, her voice carrying just enough for the others to hear, "I was telling Mom yesterday how amazing it is that you finally did something nice for the family. Booking this trip must have taken everything you had." Her eyes gleamed as though daring me to break. My mother chuckled softly. My father stayed quiet. I clenched my fists in my lap, nails digging into my palms. They wanted a reaction. They wanted me to confirm their story of me as the lesser, the fragile, the desperate one.
But I wouldn't give them that.
"You're welcome," I said instead, meeting her gaze. "I'm glad you're enjoying what I worked hard to give you." The captain laughed at something unrelated, and the boat surged forward, cutting through the waves. But in that silence between us, I saw it, the flicker of annoyance in her eyes. She had expected me to cower. I didn't, and that was the first crack in her armor. The excursion ended at sunset, the sky a fiery canvas of oranges and purples as the boat returned to the dock. My family climbed off, already buzzing about dinner plans, while I lingered a step behind. My chest was tight, but not from defeat. This time it was adrenaline, the kind that comes when you realize you've survived a battle without letting your enemy taste your fear. I walked alone back to my cottage, the sky darkening above me, the path lit by scattered lanterns. And that was when I heard it. A voice. Low, deliberate. Too close. "Emily." I froze, my blood running cold. Turning, I saw a shadow detach itself from the palms. A man I didn't recognize stepped into the dim light, his face half hidden under a cap. He wasn't part of the resort staff. I would have remembered him. His posture was rigid, his eyes trained on me like I was prey. My heart slammed against my ribs. Every instinct screamed to run, but my feet rooted to the ground. "How do you know my name?" I managed to ask, my voice sharper than I felt inside. The man tilted his head, a slow, calculated movement. "Your family talks too much," he said. His tone was flat, almost rehearsed, but the meaning sent chills through me. He took one step closer, the lantern light catching on something metallic at his wrist. "They don't know what they've started. But you will." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Before I could respond, he turned sharply and disappeared back into the palms, swallowed by the night as though he had never been there at all. I stood frozen, my breath shallow, my pulse thundering in my ears. Who was he? What did he mean? And why, out of everyone, had he come to me? My mind spun with possibilities, each darker than the last. But one thought rose above the noise, chilling me to the bone. This wasn't just family drama anymore. Something far bigger and far more dangerous had just entered my life, and I had no idea how deep it would go. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the man's shadow stepping out of the palms, his words echoing like poison in my skull. "They don't know what they've started. But you will." The room was dark except for the faint glow of the moon spilling across the curtains, silver light touching the floorboards like a quiet warning. I sat on the edge of the bed, knees tucked to my chest, listening for every creak, every rustle of palm fronds, every shift of the ocean tide outside. Fear has a way of amplifying sound. What might have been a branch brushing against the window felt like footsteps. The whisper of the wind across the shutters sounded like breathing. I kept replaying the moment over and over, trying to make sense of it. Who was he? A local? A stranger who overheard something? Or worse, someone tied to my family in ways I didn't yet understand? The possibility that they had secrets, darker than just the cruelty they showed me, wasn't far-fetched. But why would he come to me and not them? What did he expect me to do? By sunrise, exhaustion had wrapped itself around me like chains, but I forced myself up, showered, and dressed. A new day didn't erase the encounter, but it did give me the cover of routine. My family wouldn't suspect anything if I showed up as though nothing had happened. And for now, that was my shield, silence. If I told them about the man, they'd laugh, dismiss it, or worse, twist it into another reason to mock me.
No.
I would keep it to myself until I understood more. At breakfast, they were all gathered in the resort's outdoor dining terrace, sipping coffee and picking at plates of tropical fruit. My sister waved me over with a smile too bright to be sincere. "There she is. We thought maybe you'd run off home." I sat down, ignoring the jab. My mother studied me carefully, her eyes sharp behind her sunglasses. "You look tired. Didn't sleep?" I forced a yawn. "Jet lag," I said, keeping my tone casual. She smirked like she'd won something, but I didn't care. Better she thought me weak than know what really haunted me. The day's itinerary, according to my sister, was hiking to a waterfall. Perfect for pictures, she announced, scrolling through her phone. She loved documenting everything for her curated online life. My father murmured something about safety and slipped into silence again. The trail was steeper than expected, winding through thick greenery. I lagged behind, not out of weakness, but out of caution. My mind kept darting back to the man in the shadows. Was he following me now? Was he watching? I scanned every bend, every rustling leaf, but saw nothing except sunlight slanting through branches and the occasional bird flitting past. Still, my pulse wouldn't calm. Halfway up the trail, while the others were distracted taking photos, I noticed something strange. A small carving on a tree trunk, etched deep into the bark. At first I thought it was just initials or graffiti left by tourists, but when I stepped closer, my stomach dropped. It was my name, Emily. Not written neatly, but scratched in jagged, uneven strokes, as if made quickly with a knife. The sight froze me in place. My breath caught, and my heart slammed so hard I thought it might burst from my chest. It couldn't be coincidence. Not here, not after last night. Emily, come on, my sister called from up the trail, impatience dripping from her voice. I snapped a photo of the carving with my phone before catching up, forcing my expression to stay neutral. Inside, panic curled tighter and tighter. Whoever that man was, he wasn't gone. He was tracking me, marking me. The hike ended at a waterfall cascading into a crystal-clear pool. My family oohed and awed, posing for photos and laughing. I sat on a rock near the edge, watching the spray catch rainbows in the sunlight, but I couldn't feel wonder. Only dread. If he knew my name, if he could get this close, then he was capable of more than just words in the dark. That night, back at my cottage, I locked every window, checked the doors twice, and sat at the small desk with my phone. My thumb hovered over the call button, debating between dialing the police or confiding in anyone. But what would I say? That a man in the dark told me a cryptic sentence, and I found my name scratched into a tree? They'd call me paranoid, dramatic. They wouldn't believe me. So instead, I scrolled through old texts, looking for comfort. My college friend, Rachel. She was one of the few people who knew the real me, who had seen my family's cruelty firsthand. My fingers trembled as I typed. Me. Something weird is happening here. I think someone's following me. I didn't expect a reply right away. It was late on the mainland, but within minutes, my phone buzzed. Rachel, tell me everything. I poured it out. The man in the shadows, his words, the carving. Her responses came fast. Rachel, this isn't nothing. You need to take it seriously. Rachel, are you sure your family doesn't know him? Me, they'd never admit it even if they did. Rachel, be careful. Trust no one, not even them. Her warning rang louder in my head than anything I'd told myself. Trust no one. I stayed awake again, listening to the night, until exhaustion finally dragged me under some time before dawn. When I woke, the sunlight was already streaming through the curtains. I rolled over, groggy, and froze. On the nightstand, where my phone had been charging, lay something that hadn't been there before. A seashell. Smooth, white, and perfectly whole. Ordinary at first glance, except for the word carved into its surface. Soon, my phone was still plugged in beside it. The door was still locked. The windows still latched. Yet someone had been here, inside my room, inches from where I slept. A cold, suffocating dread gripped me. He wasn't just watching me anymore. He was inside my world, breaching the spaces I thought were safe. I stumbled back from the nightstand, heart hammering, ball rising in my throat. My first instinct was to run to my family, tell them everything. But then I thought of their smirks, their disbelief, their love of twisting my pain into a spectacle. They'd laugh. Or worse, they'd accuse me of planting it myself, desperate for attention. No. I couldn't go to them. But I also couldn't stay silent. Rachel's words came back like a lifeline. Trust no one. I shoved the shell into my bag, grabbed my phone, and stepped outside into the morning air. The ocean glittered as though mocking me, pretending everything was paradise when my world was unraveling. I had to make a choice. Either keep playing their games, the family drama, the cutting remarks, or step into a darker, more dangerous game I didn't understand yet. And then I saw him. Across the courtyard, leaning casually against a palm tree, was the same man from that night. Hat low, arms crossed, as though he belonged there. His eyes met mine, unblinking, unwavering. A small smile curved at his lips, slow and deliberate. He lifted his hand, not to wave, not to threaten, but to point directly at me. And then he mouthed a single word.
Tonight.
He was gone by the time I blinked. 1 second he was leaning against a palm tree, pointing at me, and the next, the courtyard was empty, just swaying leaves, a couple of tourists walking by, the sound of waves. But the echo of his presence lingered like smoke in my chest. Tonight. All day, those 6 letters pressed into me like a weight I couldn't shift. I couldn't eat, couldn't focus, couldn't keep my hands from trembling whenever I tried to lift a glass or adjust my sunglasses. My family, as always, noticed, though not in the way I needed. "You're jumpy," my sister sneered at lunch, stirring her cocktail with a little plastic umbrella. "What? Did you finally realize you're too boring for this place?" My mother chuckled, my father sighed. I let the words pass over me like waves over rocks. If I reacted, I'd give them more power. But inside, rage burned hotter with every passing moment. They didn't know the danger shadowing me. They didn't care. And why would they? They'd never protected me before. Why would they start now? By mid-afternoon, I made my decision. If he wanted tonight, then tonight he would get me, but on my terms. I was done waiting, done cowering. Rachel's voice buzzed in my head again. Trust no one. She was right. My family couldn't help me. The police might laugh at me. So I had to help myself. I slipped away from the resort under the pretense of needing alone time, something they were only too glad to grant me. In town, I found a small shop that sold camping gear and tourist supplies. With the little cash I carried, I bought a flashlight, a pocket knife, and a whistle. Not much, but enough to make me feel less helpless. Then I walked the coastline, memorizing the shadows, the angles of rocks, the pathways through the palms. If tonight was meant for confrontation, I wanted to know the terrain. I wanted to turn his confidence into his weakness. Dusk came fast, the sky painted in streaks of orange and purple before fading into black. I ate dinner with my family in silence, pushing food around my plate, listening to their laughter without joining in. My heart raced with every tick of the clock. By the time we returned to our cottages, I felt stretched so thin I might snap. Inside, I turned off every light, sat on the floor with my back against the bed, knife in my hand, flashlight and whistle within reach. My bag was already packed with essentials in case I had to run. And then I waited. Minutes crawled into hours. The ocean roared outside, louder at night, like it was warning me of what was coming. My eyelids grew heavy, but every time my head drooped, I snapped it back up. I couldn't afford to slip. Not tonight. Sometime after midnight, I heard it, the faintest scrape at the window. My breath hitched. Slowly, deliberately, I tightened my grip on the knife. The scrape came again, followed by a soft thud, then silence. My pulse thundered in my ears. And then the door handle turned. I sprang to my feet, flashlight beam cutting across the room. For a heartbeat, nothing, just the glint of the metal handle. Then the door creaked open. He stepped inside, the same man I'd seen in the shadows and in the courtyard. Hat low, clothes dark, his face partially hidden but unmistakable. He closed the door behind him with a calmness that chilled me to the bone. "You're braver than I thought," he said softly, his voice low, almost conversational. "Most people would have run to their family. But not you." I swallowed hard, keeping the knife steady, even though my hands trembled.
Who are you?
"What do you want from me?" He tilted his head, that small smile returning. "Not from you. For you." The words twisted my gut. For me? What does that even mean? He stepped closer, the air between us tightening. Your family thinks you're nothing. They've made sure you believe it too. But they've kept secrets. Big ones. And it's time you learn the truth. I shook my head, rage and fear colliding in my chest. If you think I'm going to believe. He cut me off, pulling something from his pocket. A folded paper, yellowed with age, edges frayed. He tossed it onto the bed, the flashlight beam catching it. Read. I kept the knife raised as I edged forward, grabbed the paper with my free hand, and unfolded it. My breath caught. It was a letter. A real letter. To my daughter, Emily. I scanned the words, my eyes blurring with disbelief. It was my father's handwriting. The letter was dated 2 years ago. In it, he wrote of regret. Regret for letting my mother and sister's cruelty run unchecked. Regret for not shielding me, for not speaking up. He wrote that he had set aside something for me, a fund, hidden from the others, enough to ensure my future was safe no matter what they tried to do. My knees nearly buckled. My father. The same man who sat silent at dinners, who looked away when they cut me down, he had cared enough to plan for me. To protect me in the only way he knew how. But then, why hadn't I known? Why hadn't he told me? As if reading my thoughts, the man said, they knew. Your sister found the papers. Your mother helped bury them. They didn't want you to know. They wanted you broken, dependent. But he tried, Emily. He tried to give you something. Tears blurred my vision. My hand shook so hard the knife nearly slipped. Why are you showing me this? Who are you to him? His expression softened, though his eyes stayed sharp. Once upon a time, I worked for your father. I was his lawyer, the one who drew up the fund. When he died, I thought it was only fair that you know the truth. But your family, they made sure you never did. The world tilted. I stumbled back, clutching the letter to my chest. My whole life, I'd believed I was unwanted, unloved, worthless. And here was proof that maybe, just maybe, I hadn't been. But before relief could take root, rage consumed it. My sister, my mother, they had stolen this from me. Deliberately. Coldly. They had kept me small, trapped me in their lies, all while pretending I was the failure. The man's voice cut through my fury. What you do with this is up to you.
Expose them.
Leave them. Or stay, and let them keep grinding you down. But at least now you know. You were never the worthless daughter. You were their greatest threat. I stared at him, chest heaving, mind reeling. I wanted to scream, to collapse, to tear through the walls of the cottage and confront them right then and there. But all I could do was whisper, why now? Why tell me this now? He gave me that slow, deliberate smile again. Because tonight, you were ready to hear it. And then, just as quietly as he'd come, he slipped out into the darkness, leaving me alone with the letter that burned like fire in my hands. I stood there until dawn, shaking, crying, laughing bitterly at the cruel, twisted irony of it all. My whole life had been shaped by their lies. But now I had proof. Now I had the weapon they never expected me to hold. When the sun rose, I walked across the courtyard, shoulders back, chin high, the letter tucked safely against my heart. My sister lounged by the pool, phone in hand, already curating her perfect morning for strangers online. My mother sipped coffee, her eyes flicking up at me in mild annoyance. I stopped in front of them, letting the silence stretch until they both looked at me. And then, with a smile as sharp as a blade, I said, we need to talk. For the first time in years, it wasn't me who felt small. It was them. And I knew, in that moment, nothing would ever be the same again.